right, the clock says we're straight up, time to start. Welcome to the Filler Up conference call, Tracking Success of the Alert Program, with my guest, Molly McEwen. You're in for a real treat today because, Molly, it's just so nice to have you here, Molly, and we're excited about doing this because neither one of us had to get on a plane to be able to do this, so I think that's always good. Say a little hello, Molly, so everybody can hear your voice.
Hi, everybody. It's a real delight to be with you today and talk about this great thing of program evaluation.
That's right. And so many of you may have already had the pleasure of hearing Molly lecture or actually have learned from her while she was a professor at Pacific University, director of their occupational therapy program out there in Oregon. I'll also include a lot of her extensive background and experience in your resources sheet that you will receive after the call. But I do want to highlight a few things here because you have earned your stripes, Molly. Molly has had a professional career spanning over 35 years, so there's no disputing that there's actual experience here, Molly, in which time you've worked in such a neat variety of settings, which is exciting to me, and I think it's why it makes you the perfect person to speak to us about the program evaluation concept. You've worked in some major medical centers, in public and private schools, at the universities, Texas Health Science Center in Dallas, Texas Women's University, and then, of course, Pacific University in Oregon. Molly has lots of experiences and has provided services to educational institutions and industry. And that's really fun because we'll allude to a lot of that as we get through the information on our call here. You've received both state and national awards, including the Fellow for the American Occupational Therapy Association, which is a very wonderful and valuable tribute to all the work that you've done to contribute to the profession. And you kind of groove on, and we have many discussions about continually promoting occupational therapy as a cost-effective approach and in supporting and maintaining healthy communities. So you're professional and research-focused lately, and this has been spurred on some by my wanting to learn from Molly in this way, is on expanding the role and practice of OT with particular interest in program evaluation. Molly and I have had many calls about this, and I continue to learn a lot about it because it's so important, and we'll just get into all the reasons soon about why it's so important that we start to generate the data that reflects the unique contributions that we have to the organizations in which we work. That as I know we've surely been in a time of a lot of fiscal crunch, and many of us have experienced that. But even as we look to expand and programs change and shift, it's so important to be able to reflect what we do and how we do it, because the joke is when we do it well, it doesn't look like it's very hard work, and that's where we want to be. But then we have to have ways to explain and let folks know why it is effective what we're doing, why it's important, why it supports their goals and their missions, and all the things that they need to prove
and it doesn't
administratively.
Need to be...
So I'm really, and then on top of all that, as though that isn't enough in life, Molly really helps us out here at TherapyWorks to continue to refine and reflect and provide more information relative to how to use the alert program well in our practices. So I'm so pleased as punch to have you here, really, to share about program evaluation. And I decided that it's one of our big jobs today, Molly, will be to take the scare or intimidation out of that wording, because I think sometimes just the word it's a little bit like research. People just kind of start to gloss over, oh my, I don't even know what I'm defining there. So we'll take care of that in the call. But I'm going to start with a quote, and I think that this is a quote from Chanakya. I didn't have time, since he was a philosopher in BC times, to be able to ask him how to pronounce his name. But It's a great quote, and it really sets the tone for our talk here, because his quote is, "Before you start some work, always ask yourself 3 questions. Why am I doing it? What the results might be? And will I be successful? Only when you think deeply and find satisfactory answers to these questions, go ahead." And I just love that, Molly, because it's that great moment of we get so excited sometimes in practice that we want to dive right in and just do things, right? And we have to step back, look at what we're supposed to do. So we'll take his royal advice to heart here and talk about how we can track our success. You'll get us kind of redirecting the course of how we're going to be documenting our success. And the objectives really, we're going to, because it's only 30 minutes here, we're going to go very broadly over looking at basically identifying strategies to track success, which will measure effectiveness and efficiency of alert program implementation using a program evaluation model. We'll understand just the basics of what is program evaluation, and we'll identify the powerful benefits of integrating program evaluation into your day-to-day practice. So we're going to keep it pretty simple, but we're going to try to give enough specifics that it helps us all to be able to learn how to how to get into it. So Molly, let's just kind of start us off and talking a little bit about what exactly does tracking the success entail.
First of all, I want to say I'm flattered with that introduction. Thank you.
You deserve it.
You kind of think 35 years, woof.
I know.
It goes very fast, but I am passionate about OT and the philosophy. So I do hope that this concept of program evaluation won't intimidate anybody, because it can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. What does it entail? Basically, it's a very systematic process to determine how effective you are in providing services. And when I'm working with folks at Therapy Works, we're talking about how effective you are in implementing the alert program. But this process that I'm going to introduce to you, if you're not familiar, is also very applicable to any aspect of your occupational therapy or professional service. So it also, when you track success or use program evaluation, it defines your work and measures it. And I have to laugh at that almost, because we're all going crazy. And so the issue here is, what do we do to fill our day? We know we go home exhausted at night. So what are those pieces? What are those activities? What are those tasks that we're engaged in? And are they all necessary? Or is it just a routine and a habit that once we started it, we just keep doing it, but really don't know if it contributes to the ultimate outcomes and goals we have established in providing the service that we're doing?
And I think, Molly, that was some of the things that you've said there. First of all, that we can kind of get into it as any kind of complex level that we want to. And then really looking at, I would agree with you. I think there's a lot of things, and I'll include myself here big time, that I do because they're part of the routine, and we are all stressed for time. But I don't really know, is that necessary? Is it important? Is whatever. So I was really excited about that part, because that's that moment of, if we take the time to look at things this way, we actually may have a lot of things that we can drop out, and some things we may be able to add that we maybe thought we would never have time to be able to do.
Well, it's interesting. Sometimes when you have a whole year, if you're in the public schools or you're in the clinics or in other systems, when something happens, some catastrophic thing, or hopefully not too catastrophic, but something interferes with your ability to do something that you've done annually or done routinely, and it just didn't happen. And it's interesting. You have to ask yourself, was that missed? Was the result of having done that over the years? Is there a difference in the outcomes I'm getting? So the other thing that program evaluation does is it guides us in changing, adapting, or continuing programs. Do we change them? Do we change the way we do them? Do we adapt them and tweak them so we're more effective and efficient? Do we even continue them, or do we develop new ones? So again, it can be as simple and as complex as we want it to be, but it's a way of thinking, and once you go through the process and understand it, you will never practice the same way again.
And it's so exciting to have you talking to us about. So I know for many of us as practitioners, we're thinking about, we have juggling. We talked about the time factor there, but we're juggling many roles and tasks, and why would we want to take the time to learn this new way? I mean, I know why a little bit, because we've talked a little bit about this, and I certainly feel that we're in a situation where we must continue to be able to represent the value of what we do. And we do want to, when we get right down to it, I want to know that my treatment is being effective. It's another level, whereas not just observationally, but really in numbers, we get to show people, oh, this is what I'm hired to do, this is how we've done it, and we're seeing success, or we're seeing support, or there's something we need to shift, but it's not that big a shift, we probably just do this or that, you know?
Well, yeah, why would you want to do this when you're juggling multiple roles? And I think it's for just that reason we're crazy busy. Society is crazy busy today. But we do have to stop, like I said earlier, and ask ourselves, how exactly are we spending our time, and was it worth it? Did it make a difference? So was it completed as efficiently as you might have done? Are you doing things, again, out of that habit that really don't have an impact? I mean, those questions, bottom line, it helps identify what is working and what is not, and that measures effectiveness of what you're doing.
And, you know, here in New Mexico, I just experienced this in talking to some of the therapists at one of our state conferences, is that our statewide program for developmental disabilities was strapped for cash, as many, many places are. And so they just decided, well, all therapies have to fade out in their service for the individuals that are covered under these waiver programs. And I thought, my immediate groan was, if we'd had some program evaluation information to show that it's not that we just do one thing and then the individual is done, but the scope of what we do, and had some numbers, I at least it would give you a way to start the conversation of why to continue. Well,
and they made that decision based on a bottom line of dollars. And so we as professionals trying to get a slice of that ever decreasing pie of money, we need to say, for this money, you're getting a great, effective, efficient service. But if you don't have that, they just go to the bottom line budget and say, this is the amount we need. We don't really know. It's kind of nice to have these folks, but we really don't have any data that supports what exactly they are doing. And if they weren't here, what would be different in the programs we're doing? And so that's very true for all disciplines.
Yeah, and so I just struck me in the meeting, and I was like, oh no, because fading services for one person may indeed be appropriate, but and going to just a consultation kind of support. But for so many individuals, they have so many aspects of life they could use support on, that you don't want to just pick one goal, you do that goal, and then so they're done, and you can fade your service back, you know?
Well, an excellent example I can say from experience is I provided consultation to the New York School Board, the Department of Education, for the whole New York, all the boroughs in the city, and they had problems with, once a child was on the rolls for services, they didn't know how to terminate. They didn't have any evaluation. So how do you look at the effectiveness of just the services, and also how it is administered, the model of service delivery, what's the most efficient, what data do we have that supports that? Because you have to be able to start and stop services at some time. Some kids need to be transitioned to different types of services, but if you don't have data to support those decisions, it can get to be a financial nightmare, and that's when they just start slicing and dicing.
Right, and then I think for our families, too, they end up thinking, please don't take my child and change their services. I'll never get the services back again if I need them, and that's such an unfortunate situation, too. So it kind of comes from all sides. So thanks for that. And then tell us a little bit about just generally what's involved in the program evaluation process, because you've said about how it really does change the way we think. So how do we start thinking differently in this?
Well, you can use the program evaluation is developing a systematic kind of process by which you look at all pieces of the services you're offered. It is like a blueprint or a framework that guides you from when you start the program and when you stop it, if you choose to stop it, and throughout the program. It can, if you are developing a new program, you can apply it to, for example, if you haven't used the alert program and you say, I want to start using the alert program, you might decide to use that with whole classrooms, with individual children, with whole schools. Whatever that is, you're making that decision based on a problem you're trying to resolve.
Right.
So it takes you through the process of what is the problem you're trying to resolve, what are all the possibilities that are contributing to that problem, what assumptions do you make about that problem and some of the issues? And then what are you proposing that'll help resolve the problem? So what are your desired results? And by answering some of these questions and others, you sit down at a table. You literally have to sit down at a table with what we call stakeholders, and I think everyone's heard that term. And the stakeholders is everyone who has something to benefit or has a stake in the resolution of this problem. So let me give an example of a large school district that I worked with. It had 32 schools, and they were implementing the alert program in all the early elementary schools with regular ed teachers. The stakeholders were, of course, those teachers. They were also the other resource services, such as speech and language pathology, the behavioral psychologists, the physical therapists. It certainly was a stakeholder was the parents, and a stakeholder was also the kiddos. So as many of those as we could, we got around the table, or we got people who represented them, and we went through systematically and asked those questions. And you would think that those questions would be pretty matter of fact, but when you hear everyone's perspectives as they individually answer those questions, you can see why it's so important to really stop before you decide to implement a program, and in this situation to address self-regulation. Ask questions so that we're all kind of on the same page, and then design the program based on the information that you have. So that process was enormously helpful, and all of those practitioners and also those teachers now think very differently.
And you know what I think is so exciting about that, as I look at the work that you did there, since I got to hear a lot about that, fortunately for me, and learn from it. But the thing that I think should be huge there is that this should boost the confidence of everybody involved. You know, it should boost the confidence of the family as a consumer. It should boost the confidence of the team to know that they're not just picking a goal and not individualizing to that person. When you get to that kind of communication level, you really should be getting some very good information and customized, individualized information, as opposed to, oh yeah, they'll make a gain on this test or whatever, which might be an outcome, but probably not when our families are involved or we're having such extreme situations with some of our students who have multiple challenges. Why it would be much more likely we'd be getting into those good functional daily routine kinds of moments, and in my mind that prevents that lack of individualization, that families and administrators and everybody could be and professionals could be comfortable we're really doing what's right for this person, not just having a meeting and making a goal and whatever.
Right. For this particular large school district, they were noticing that the kindergarten and first grade teachers were absolutely befuddled with the numbers, percentages of children who are entering into their classrooms and were not ready to learn. They were not set up, and what we would call as occupational therapists, neurologically, they weren't ready to learn. The educators looked at it as social emotional development was not at a level that the teachers knew how to help them learn. And as a therapist, working with those teachers, found that their referrals were skyrocketing, and they could not hire more therapists. They couldn't have enough money to change that, so the therapist said, we have a problem here that is very definable. We have a huge population of kids. They have poor social emotional development, delayed, and we are seeing a lot of those delays based on issues of self-regulation, and that's a sensory motor self-regulation, which is really foundational for learning. So given that, that was the problem they were trying to resolve.
And good for them for saying, rather than just going, oh, we have too many referrals, oh, well, this is that moment. We must be proactive and interact with our folks and say, look, this is not, I know the word's overused right now, but not a sustainable model, right? Exactly.
And that's exactly what the administration got involved with it. And from the very beginning, the therapists went and worked with the administrators, and they sat, and the primary administrator sat in classrooms and said, we need to apply this concept to every early elementary classroom. And so getting the communication going at the top levels, people who make the decisions and determine where the funds go is critical. And then the data that you get, and they did a pilot. We'll talk about that a little bit later. As you get data, it just reinforces that this is a good thing and we need to continue it. And you get more efficient. So that's one of the issues with the process. After you decide the problem and all the variables, the strategies, designing the problem or designing the activities of how you're going to implement seems simple, but that too takes people sitting down around a table saying, what are all the things we are going to do to address this? And even if you just say we're going to use the alert program, how you implement the alert program has many pieces to the puzzle. Those are all pieces that are literally put on a chart, that are measurable, that are identifiable for objectives and outcomes, and can be monitored over time.
Yeah, and I think the beauty, again, and why we're doing the call is that so many of our administrators and our teachers and colleagues want help with self-regulation right now. It's a piece that we really have an essential component to contribute to, and especially in our educational systems, it's huge. We're all self-regulators. It's not an optional moment.
That's right.
We may be good at it or not, but or more automatic at it than others. But so I think it's like the perfect thing to be able to take to our administrators for those pilots, for those test it out. Let's do something small and manageable, and then see, is this the way we want to go? Is this something that's worth pursuing for our entire district? Because so many of us, how we're performing, and I know, Molly, you have alluded to, and we have some information in our research document on our website about a couple of nice studies that show basically that predicting success for lots of our students in life and in having attention, good, reasonable attention spans, but related to self-regulation is huge. There's a nice study that was done by Blair and Diamond on the biological processes in prevention and intervention, the promotion of self-regulations as a means for preventing school failure. And so the citation for that is in the research document. I didn't mean to overwhelm us with that, but I mean the literature is there linking learning and self-regulation. So we already have the to talk to our administrators, and I really encourage us to be doing that.
Well, there's another piece that goes with that, is that do you know that in this country there is 25% of teachers leave the profession every year.
Oh, my gosh.
Yes, it's a huge percentage, and that's causing $7 billion annually to the national economy.
Whoa.
And it's huge. So there's chronically high rates of teacher turnover, so we have lots of younger, less experienced teachers. We have teachers, because they're less experienced, are coming into very difficult classrooms, which chronically are getting higher and higher numbers of students. So occupational therapists and self-regulation has a real role in helping these teachers, giving them skills to work with these kids who are now coming from backgrounds and experiences and they're less prepared for learning.
And that makes perfect sense. And I know that was one of the emphasis that was an outcome. Well, I may be overstating it here, but in that large district that you were referring to, Molly, that they really wanted their teachers to feel better prepared to be teachers and to do what their job was in the classroom.
So instead of doing a pull-out approach, let's give the teachers skills and then work and consult with them to get really good with that and help them problem solve the really complex kiddos, but a lot of the skills they can use will help decrease some of the behaviors in the classroom, keep kids better focused and capable of learning, and help the teacher feel more confident in what she's doing.
Absolutely. And I know we have about 5 minutes left here or so. So talk to us a little bit about what exactly we're evaluating or how one gets to, I think some people seize up when they hear the word data being generated and stuff like that. So just give us a little teaser about that, Molly, and how that works.
Sure. When I mentioned earlier that you literally come up with a chart of all pieces of your program, and in this situation we'll use, of course, the alert program as an example if you're going to implement it. You are measuring both process and product, and you will get numbers, and the data will come from percentages or numbers. It's descriptive data, so you don't have to think that you're doing high statistical analysis. This is a program evaluation model, a very simple way of looking at effectiveness, not a highly complex, rigorous research design.
Right, and I think that was something I really learned a lot from you about when we were talking is like, oh, okay, so we really just go percentages or those kinds of things. So it makes it much, much less intimidating as we're looking at the information that way.
Well, and you're measuring process and product is probably the one we're most familiar with because we're looking at does the kid attend better? And yes, that you need to measure. Student self-perception can be measured. You can look at the students' community behaviors and measure whether there's an improvement there. You can measure improvement in the child-parent interactions. You can measure very easily on is there a decrease in this year in referrals to the behavioral team? Is there an increase in school attendance, participation? Is there an increase in the students' intrinsic motivation? And there's tools available, and you can design your own tools very easily for those. The process part is what we don't think about the most, and that's to look at the process of how teachers are participating. What's the teacher's level of competency to support a child in gaining self-regulation skills? Is the teacher able to integrate the program into their own curriculum and into the classroom? Is the communication that I use effective? And is the equipment and supplies adequate? And you can go on. Those are examples of process types of things. So both of those process product categories are outlined and identified as you work up your program evaluation model, and those you can evaluate what you want and let the rest go. So you can evaluate one or two of those things or many of those things.
And I know, Molly, I don't want to ask you a hard question here, and I hope I represent it well, but I remember when you and I talked after they did all this wonderful work with you in the program evaluation process in that district is one of the things that the therapists figured out, this isn't about so-and-so isn't a good teacher. It's about is what we're doing working. So it's not like I know that you had to kind of work through that when you first started with that.
Well, what's the child, the student in the classroom is usually in our mind our client, but the parent can be your client as well, and the teacher in that situation was very much the client. So you really need to understand the teacher, and it wasn't to evaluate the teacher like a personnel evaluation, but it was for you to get an evaluation of where the teacher was so that when you went in and had an hour of consultation in that classroom, the time was well spent. You were focusing on your assessment of where the teacher was in the process of learning how to apply the ALERT program in her classroom.
And we'll stay with this example of that particular school division there in Canada because one of the things that I found fascinating, and this is, again, the why would I want to do this moment, right, is that the OTs in the surveys and the tools that you all developed that measured things, what they found out is that one of the things that was the most labor-intensive for them to do was the least valuable to some of the teachers, and the things that were the easiest, like I think you said there was like a movement strategy of the week that they did, and that was a really easy thing. The therapist would post it, it got emailed, whatever, and it was easy cheesy, and that was like one of the most popular, helpful things to the teachers. And so as we look at that busyness in our schedules, as we look at how we manage what we do, that's a great example of, oh, well, look at that. The thing I was spending so much time on isn't as helpful, and this other thing that's very easy was enormously helpful to the teachers. Well,
a concrete example of that I'll just give to, because I think we've all been there, is that they had a parent night where they were going to talk about self-regulation with the parents.
Okay.
And mind you, they had almost 35 elementary schools, and at that parent night there were 15 parents there. Now, any of you listening to this know that when you have to develop an in-service training, whether it be an hour or a half hour, and the amount of time that goes into it to do the PowerPoint presentation, to pull all the data together, make sure it's what you want to do, and they put in a lot of time with that, and there were 15 parents. So you have to ask yourself, was that a good use of time? Was the information not what was of value to the families, or were the communication strategies to get the families there not a good communication strategy? So why it doesn't work is it has many variables, and the program evaluation plan allows you to look at that. Just like when you're treating a child and you're not seeing outcomes you're after, you have to look at all the pieces of the puzzle that may contribute to that kid getting more competent or losing competency as it relates to their occupational routines and roles.
Well, I could just talk all night with this, and yet we are not allowed to. So here's the deal, Mal. I so appreciate you helping us to start the conversation about this, because in my mind, this is a huge thing for any of us to be looking at what we do and how we do it, and the value of it. Not that we're doing something wrong necessarily, but being as efficient and as effective as is absolutely possible, and demonstrating that to our administrators so that when they're up against the wall, when they need numbers on things, they're provided for with them.
Absolutely.
And my experience, I've been lucky enough to work under some great administrators, is that when we go and talk to them about those things, they are super receptive to it. It's been my experience about that.
Right. They want to have that numbers speak to them.
Yes.
And they can go to bat for us when we give them the data that helps them go to bat for us.
And I think, too, for me especially, this is not something that comes naturally, or I don't have a lot of background as a therapist in this. And I think that's true for a lot of us folks. And that's some of the reason that we offer Molly's services in project rates and in hourly rates to help to support us with it, because it's so important. And yet I know for me it's not something I could just set out and do very well. You've spent a lot of time in this information, Molly, and you know how to get the group gathered in the stakeholders, get everybody clear about what we're doing, and then talk about, okay, how are we going to do it and keep that reasonable within our system in the way that it is now.
Right. It's
absolutely
a fun
Well,
process.
thank you so much for all your expertise here, and I'm hoping that I can twist your arm and we'll get a kind of a part 2 to kind of dive into even some more examples. I know we stuck with a lot of school system examples there, but I felt like we already had described it, and it was a good way to be able to give some examples in our short time here. So, Molly, thank you so much. And those of you on the call, remember that you will get your resource sheet afterwards. And just thank you, Molly. We're going to go ahead and hang up here and hope everybody has a great evening.
It was good to be with you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye now.